It's shocking when a person goes missing without a trace, but if you're a regular viewer of bad things, you know it happens with astounding regularity. What's more shocking is when whole groups of people vanish into thin air. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the Roanoke Colony, the Mary Celeste, and the USS Cyclops are just a few examples of mass vanishings. Although not as famous as the ones we've mentioned, the vanishing village of Anjikuni Lake is just as creepy and perplexing. Or is it? Join Bad Things as we take a look at the Lake Anjikuni Mystery, the theories, and what most likely happened in this strange mass vanishing. Lake Anjikuni is located in Nunavut's Kivalliq region, about 1,500 miles northwest of Ottawa, Canada. With fewer than 2 persons per square mile, the lake is currently nearly completely unpopulated, but it once was. For thousands of years, people like the Chippewayan Saïsidine and the Caribou Inuit have been attracted to this challenging environment because of the abundance of wildlife. However, the Inuit did not originally live in the area. Instead, they spent their winters close to the shore. But by the 18th century, the Harvak Tuamiut and Ihalmiut Inuit clans started to live year-round near the lakes and rivers. Our mystery begins with one of these Inuit villages and a trapper named Joe LaBelle. On a cold November day in 1930, a Canadian fur trapper named Joe LaBelle landed on the shores of Canada's Lake Anjikuni in search of warmth, food, and a place to sleep. LaBelle had previously visited the little Inuit community and knew that he would be welcomed with warm smiles and open arms, but as he approached the village, he was met with an unsettling quiet. LaBelle beached on the lake shore next to kayaks that were battered by wave action about 100 yards from the Lake Anjikuni village, and began yelling a greeting as he made his way toward the village. Instead of a response from his Inuit friends, he was greeted by 2 bony, nearly starved huskies crawling towards him. Not far from where the dogs met LaBelle, the corpses of 7 starved dogs lay on the ground. LaBelle saw evidence of smoldering embers from extended cold flames in fire pits. On closer investigation, he discovered a saucepan filled with charred food leftovers. He scoured the village, hoping to discover someone or an explanation for their disappearance. LaBelle became increasingly suspicious as he made his way into the settlement, which included 6 elk-skinned cottages which housed over 30 people. He entered one of the dwellings and cautiously started looking around. He expected to see bones or decaying bodies, but instead discovered deerskin parkas, boots, garments in the process of being sewn, and greasy iron pots standing over long-dead cooking fires. The only bones LaBelle discovered were those of fish and deer, which were strewn all over the ground. LaBelle also noted a rusty rifle in the corner of the hut. Why would the Inuit not take this with them if they had to, for some unknown reason, leave the village? He discovered another dwelling packed with food and weapons, as well as a half-mended child sealskin coat with the needle still in it, as if abandoned in the middle of stitching. LaBelle couldn't find a reason why the locals would abandon their Anjikuni village. They had food and shelter, there didn't seem to be any sign of a struggle or violence, and leaving their weapons behind made no sense if they walked off into the wild. LaBelle was exhausted, but he wasn't about to take shelter in a creepy village where 30-plus people had just gone missing. Frostbitten, LaBelle headed to the closest telegraph office and told the man behind the counter about his unusual discovery. After hearing the whole account, an emergency message was sent to the nearest Canadian Mounted Police barracks. When the mounted police arrived, LaBelle had calmed himself enough to give them his whole story. The Mounties then recruited trappers Armand Laurent and his 2 sons to aid them in navigating the hazardous terrain. They questioned Laurent and his boys whether they had seen anything out of the ordinary lately. They told the police that they had seen strange lights in the sky near the Anjikuni village. They said the lights were unlike the northern lights. They came from an enormous illuminated flying thing that seemed to be changing shape, transforming from a cylinder into a bullet-like object, and was headed in the direction of the missing villagers' camp. When the Mounties reached the outskirts of the village, they came across the Inuit burial grounds with recently dug-up graves. The Mounties assumed this was done by humans rather than animals, since the terrain was too hard to excavate the graves without equipment. After 2 weeks of investigation, the Mounties determined that the villagers had been missing for around 2 months. During the inquiry, numerous officers reported seeing odd lights in the sky, which they characterized as blue and pulsing. And the pulsating lights bring us to, you probably guessed it, the theories on what happened to the villagers. When a mystery of this magnitude happens, there are bound to be some theories, mostly wacky, on what happened. Our number one theory and most popular is aliens. This theory speculates that extraterrestrial beings took the villagers for unknown purposes. With Armand Laurent, his 2 sons, police and other witnesses claiming to have seen strange lights and craft in the area, it could have only been aliens. Obviously, there is no evidence for this theory. A natural disaster killed the Inuits. This theory suggests that the villagers may have been the victims of a sudden and catastrophic natural event such as a landslide, tsunami, or avalanche. The lack of physical evidence of a natural disaster at the site debunks this theory immediately. Mass murder. Some have theorized that all the villagers were murdered in a mass murder event. This theory is highly unlikely, as the evidence of such a brutal occurrence would be easily seen by investigators. Disease outbreak. This theory proposes that a sudden and deadly disease outbreak may have killed the villagers. We can debunk this theory in the same manner as the mass murder theory. There would be evidence of a mass outbreak. So, what most likely happened to the Anjikuni Lake villagers? How did a whole village of people vanish off the face of the earth? They didn't. They never existed in the first place. Brian Dunning of the Skeptoid podcast did a deep dive into this mystery and found out it's not a mystery after all. It's a hoax. The most famous published account of Joe Lebel's mysterious encounter comes from Frank Edwards' 1959 book, Stranger Than Science. According to Dunning, there are several things about the Joe Lebel story in the book that raise red flags. For one thing, it happened in November, when average temperatures are 13 degrees Celsius below freezing. Anjikuni Lake is a sheet of ice. Kayaks pulled up on the beach would not be battered by wave action. The very presence of kayaks so far inland is suspect, though not impossible. Migratory Inuit would often portage their kayaks to hunt caribou. These eastern Igloolik kayaks were made of sealskin stretched over willow branches. But the small Anjikuni Lake is landlocked so far inland on the barrens that neither willow nor sealskin were available, and this would be by far the farthest inland that the historical use of Igloolik kayaks would have ever been documented. Not impossible, but highly suspect, Dunning would say. Edwards also had Lebel recounting a permanent community, a friendly little Eskimo village of about 30 inhabitants that he'd known for many years. A mounted police statement debunked this by saying, a village with such a large population would not have existed in such a remote area of the Northwest Territories. Another shady account in the story was that they had left sealskin garments behind, in a region where there was caribou hide rather than sealskin. And as a trapper, Lebel should have been able to identify these skins properly. Unfortunately, fake news isn't a new phenomenon, and an early incarnation of fake news probably set the ball rolling for this hoax. The first known publication regarding the Anjikuni Lake mystery is a 1976 citation of an article dated November 29, 1930, authored by Emmett E. Kelleher for the Halifax Herald newspaper. Kelleher, writing as a special correspondent for the publication, repeated Lebel's account, giving the settlement a population of 25 and offering a restrained version of the remnants Lebel discovered, which included a single rusty old gun and a few dog carcasses. The article also included a generic picture of an Inuit community. On January 17, 1931, Cortlandt Starnes, the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, published the results of Sergeant J. Nelson's investigation into the event. Speaking with traders in the area, Nelson discovered that Joe LaBelle was a real person who exclusively operated in northern Manitoba. He also learned that Kelleher's picture was an old one from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police archives, and since no one in the area had heard of this settlement or its disappearance, Nelson determined that the whole incident was a sensationalized hoax orchestrated by Kelleher. Kelleher's story was then just added to and embellished by Edwards' 1959 book, Stranger Than Science. So the only people to be believed and could corroborate this story would be the men of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. According to S.W. Horrell, a Royal Canadian Mounted Police historian, many years ago the members, then retired, who had served in the area at the time these events were purported to have happened, were asked for their comments on the story. They could not confirm it, recalled nothing like it, and were astounded that such a ridiculous tale could be believed. Our files were carefully searched. No strange craft was ever reported. No one named Joe LaBelle ever came to the RCMP in panic about Lake Anjikuni. The RCMP did not send out any search parties. The only records we have on the story are copies of letters to correspondents like yourself, informing the writers that the story is entirely fictitious. The vanishing village of Anjikuni Lake is a cautionary tale of how a fictitious story can, over time, snowball into a believable mystery. With the advent of the internet, these mysteries will slowly be exposed for what they really are: hoaxes. Still not convinced? We'll leave you with a little takeaway. Joe LaBelle reported the disappearance of the settlement by telegraph, even though there were no telegraphs within 1,000 kilometers of the lake. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.